What's up, friends? Welcome back to Rooted Wisconsin, where we are dedicated to authentically sharing the stories of the folks that make Wisconsin an awesome place to be. We appreciate you listening and subscribing. Like to start every episode off with that. Appreciate you clicking the like button, sharing with your friends. Check out the Patreon if you haven't yet. And our first day recording in our new studio. This is going to be the second one, so really excited about being in the shadows of Lambeau Field. And excited about our new space for Rooted Wisconsin. So thanks for coming along and ready to dive into another show. Today we've got Captain Barb Carey with us. Hi, Barb.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. Appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, it's, not the best weather for fishing, so your timing was perfect.
Nice. Yeah, especially this rain is going to mess up a lot of ice in a lot of different places. What's your winter been like so far?
It's been terrible. Yeah, we've had to adjust, change locations of where we're providing some of our fishing events, and it's been a logistical nightmare. A lot more ice checking. Safety is so important. And one of my worst fears, I think, is to get someone all jazzed up about the sport of ice fishing and then to have something happen to them. So we really drill home about ice safety and safety in general. Yeah.
One of the first things ice fishermen should learn, right? Ice fisher should
ice
learn.
Anglers?
Ice anglers. I like it. I was wondering, you probably saw the look in my eyes. I started that. Yeah. But yeah, the climax or the ultimate thing that I know plenty of folks that have went out on the ice and not had that understanding first, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm so aware of ice and ice conditions, and earlier this season, I walked by a lake and I saw some people out there ice skating. And I think ice anglers have a much more educated base of understanding of what's safe, and you get some of the other people that are just leisurely walking or ice skating that might not be aware of that, and I felt nervous for them. I hope they know what they're doing. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so let's dive in. You do a lot of different things. We'll get to those today. I want to know, where'd your fishing journey start? Where'd your angling journey start? How'd you get into it? Well, I grew up in the UP of Michigan, and I wish my family would have been strong anglers, but they weren't. But I do have one memory when my dad took me to this VFW ice fishery in Wakefield, Michigan on Sunday Lake. And I just remember being there with him, and I ended up catching a little tiny perch, and we brought it in to register, and I ended up winning a prize for catching the smallest fish. And that just was so exciting for me. I mean, it's hard to remember a lot of things about your childhood, but I remember this so distinctly. I even remember I ordered a Fresca at the VFW. So that day was really important to me for some reason. I don't know if it was the time with my dad or the little prize I got or what, and then we kind of had a summer place on Sawyer Lake in Dickinson County, and we had a bunch of cousins that lived in the neighborhood and spent a lot of time just catching bluegills off the dock, and then graduated to a rowboat. And it's just something that I think the imprinting on me was just the perfect timing.
Mm-hmm. When you were receptive to the message.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you get one time, I remember my parents were visiting some of their friends who lived on a lake, and they were talking inside, so I went down to the dock and picked up a fishing rod and casted it out and was reeling it in, and I caught this, what I thought was a huge bass. And I just remember my heart rate increasing, I was just so excited, and that feeling that came over you, and I remember dragging it up to the house, just screaming to show my parents, and it was such an exciting moment. And I still get that way, so I don't know if it's timing or what, but it's a passion for sure.
Yeah, it's stuck. Don't they do a really unique, or haven't they in the past done a pretty unique I think it was an ice fishing tournament on Sawyer Lake.
Yeah, it's Tip Up Town. It's next weekend.
Yeah, is that something you partake in?
Oh yes, it's my annual time to take out all my nieces and nephews, and now my great nieces and nephews. So the whole family looks forward to it because it's kind of a time we come together just to take the kids fishing, you know. So I have my one nephew's coming home from North Carolina, and it's a big deal for us.
That's awesome. Isn't there like tagged fish or something that are...
Yeah, they did that in the past. I don't know if they're doing it or not this year. And, you know, it's interesting to see as the time goes on how little local events like that change, you know. And the participation actually has been down quite a bit, which is really unfortunate, I think. You know, back in the day, they had snowmobile races on Eddy Lake, which is right next door, and then the ice fishing contest on Sawyer Lake. And after an accident one year, they discontinued the snowmobile races, so now it's just on Sawyer Lake. But, you know, there isn't the volume of people that I think there had been in the past.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, well, part of the reason, I'm sure why you started Wisconsin Women Fish, right, to get more people into the sport in general?
Yeah, you know, that wasn't my goal initially. I think that, you know, it's been almost 20 years since I've been doing events for women, and 20 years ago was a very different culture for women in fishing than it is today. And I remember being out ice fishing on Lake Mendota in Madison and, you know, different lakes around southern Wisconsin, and never, ever seeing another woman, you know, and it just was baffling to me because I got so much enjoyment out of it. I thought they must not know about it. You know, they must not know how fun it is. So that's kind of what inspired me to have my first ice fishing event for women. But at that time, that was before social media. So how do you reach people that might be interested? So initially, I just invited a bunch of my friends, and they didn't really have a passion for fishing, but they thought it sounded like a good time, you know, and it turned into one of those typical ice fishing events where it's, you know, 20 below zero and everyone stays in the shacks and just drinks a lot and there's no fish caught. And, you know, it kind of, they had a blast, you know, but I was disappointed, you know, because it wasn't what I had visualized. But, you know, then you meet one person that actually has a passion for fishing and then another. And it kind of, I said, hey, do you think if we had a fishing camping event in the fall, you know, women would want to come? And it started out, you know, with, you know, 20 people, I think, at our very first fish camp. And, you know, it's now blown up. We have over 600 members from 22 states and Canada. And, you know, to see how things have changed since that time, it's pretty incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. So it started from a place of just looking for more people to do it with.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
You know, and I wasn't a good angler by any means at that time, you know, and it was one of those situations that, you know, you'd see these old guys out there fishing and they wouldn't tell you anything. You know, it was just like how my family wasn't good anglers. They didn't know what to tell me, you know, and you just think you're doing it right, you know, and the catch rate is really low and it's difficult and you can't get any information. You go to the bait shops and I just remember really struggling to really improve my skills at that time, you know. And once I, you know, the group grew a little bit, and, you know, I found myself, you know, well, I knew more than than they did, but, you know, we just kind of learned together. And I think over the course of the years, my goal has been to stay more knowledgeable than a lot of the groups, so I have something to teach them. So that's kind of been a drive for me to improve my skills. And the whole industry has changed the last 20 years too. You know, there's so much information available now that wasn't available then. And there was classes and clinics and information, and it's a lot easier to learn just from, at your fingertips, as opposed to trying to find a generous old soul out on the ice.
Yeah. And way different technology too. That's changed the game a lot, right?
Definitely. And not only to catch fish, but you're staying warmer. The clothes are much better made, and the electronics and the rods and everything. But what's really, I think that I've had a stake in the change is what's available for women.
Mm-hmm.
I remember, not that many years ago, you'd see men's ice fishing boots, and they would have 2,000 grams of Thinsulate in them. And then you would see women's ice fishing boots, and they would have 1,000 grams. Like, women's feet, only get half as cold as men's. I never understood that, and, they went through that phase of making everything pink and poor quality. So, just the timing of my arrival in this industry, I've kind of been a voice of change, which has kind of given me a little bit of a bad rap, I think, because I'm the one that was poking them with a stick all the time, like, hey, this isn't good enough for women. This isn't, I was always the one telling them, hey, this isn't acceptable. And that was, a lot of times they didn't want to hear that.
Mm-hmm. Someone has to poke, though.
Yeah.
Someone has to hold the stick.
Right. And I think that in the overall industry, that has been my role, I think, of what I, in terms of the professional piece of me, there's a whole nother piece of me that's leading this group of women, which is a different hat I wear.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as the companies, and they've really come around, and some have listened, and what the payback now is, women are spending a fortune in fishing, and there's good products to buy. And if you're not, and they're educated consumers. So if you don't have a good product, they're not being fooled anymore like they were at one time.
Yeah. Doesn't it seem like such low-hanging fruit? Like, before it happened, why wouldn't you want to open up the other 50% of the population base that could potentially use your products, right?
They just never really thought it was going to be viable or something.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to change some of that old mentality.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so interesting in the group that I run now with so many people. A lot of the certain age group women have had that experience where they weren't allowed to go, only the boys could go. And,
you're talking like familial.
Yes,
yeah.
Absolutely. And when you look, that wasn't that long ago, and thankfully things have really changed in that regard.
I was going to ask that. You had mentioned that kind of perception that you witnessed earlier, from early in your time to now. Do you think, outside of, it can probably be skewed a bit because you run big events, right, where there's a lot of women fishing. But just like if you go out fishing for like Tip Up Town, where, your intention is on your family, it's more of a quote-unquote standard fishing event. Do you notice more females on the ice?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, everywhere you go. And I think social media is a big part of that, because even if you don't see it in your backyard, it's very close by.
Mm-hmm.
And just, you get to know the people, and you see them out there, and you see what they're wearing and what they're using and how skilled they are. And it's just been so fun to watch it evolve.
Yeah, I assumed as much. After we exchanged our first couple messages about you being on the show, kind of by happenstance, I can't remember what social media I was on. It was either TikTok or something, but I saw these series of just great TikToks with this group of women anglers that were just having a blast ice fishing together, and there wasn't a dude there, it was
right.
all female anglers, and the perception of it was just fantastic. Like they did some actual like fishing content too. Like they made it very funny, but then they had some normal fishing content too. And it was like, y'all could outfish most of the dudes I know, by them talking. And that's just awesome. And I mean, that's got to feel good to play a part in that, right?
Yeah, it is. And it's interesting because the younger people, the younger women that are coming up kind of after me, they're really dialed into social media. Mm-hmm. I'm the old goat that, is like, oh, this is really hard for me. How do you do this? Like most people are in my age group, it's just kind of, I don't have a cricket phone, but, it's just not easy for me to do what they're doing. And they're really able to, showcase, what it is they're doing, and hats off to them, and they're getting huge reach, from what they do. And in the skills, definitely there are some skilled women anglers out there. And I don't know how many times in the last 15 years I've been like backing a boat down a boat launch, and some guys like just when I get started offers to help or something, and I said, no, I think I got it, but thanks.
You didn't read the jersey.
Yeah. It's funny.
Yeah. That's the a standard bias or stereotype that I'm sure you've bucked hundreds of times over there.
Yeah, even in the fishing stores, like, you go to the fishing department of a store or something, and a lot of women joke about it, In fact, I think it was a meme yesterday that this woman says, yeah, time to go in the fishing department and pretend I don't know anything. So it's interesting.
Has that connotation, stereotype feeling, has that ever had you feel like you were pushed away from the sport at any time? No, because I'm a pusher backer. Yeah.
No one is pushing me out of this element, and, I maybe ruffle some feathers along the way, but I'm still going to say what I think, and it's kind of changed. I almost feel protective now over this group of women that participate with me, that are in our organization, and women everywhere, I guess. And it's so interesting because, like, if something comes up on social media, and it doesn't happen as much as it used to, but, say a company, they post something, and it always has that little bit of sexual connotation or something if it's a woman who looks a certain way or something. And it got, this one particular post got a huge blowback from the women's angling community. And I didn't have anything to do with it, and I sat back just feeling, way to go, gals, So then they're contacting me, the companies and the reps. What do you think of this? I think you were way off base, and good for them for letting you have it. It's just inappropriate. So I think that women anglers as a whole have grown within the culture, and there's a certain amount of, I think, respect that they've earned and they demand now, and it's great to see. Absolutely.
Yeah. So when you go back to the day with your dad and the bass, what's the next step from that? What how did your interest in the sport and ultimately career and endeavors end up to evolving?
Well, I had moved down to Oklahoma for a while and did a little bit of fishing down there. And then whenever I'd come back up for the summer, I would take my daughter fishing. But I think this is pretty common when, you go from high school to college and then oftentimes parenthood, and you're so busy working and raising kids that fishing, for me, it just went away. Mm-hmm. And, you're running the kids over to this and over to that and, trying to just keep up. And it wasn't until my daughter was like later high school that I actually gotten back into it more seriously. And that's about the same time when I started a lot of this stuff looking for some other women to fish with and trying to improve my skills. And just, fishing in general opens the door to so much adventure. The possibilities just around fishing and adventure are unlimited. And that's another thing I think that has really grown in the past 20 years, because 20 years ago, everyone went to the same lake all the time. They fished for the same species, and they just did the things they always did, and they were always shown. And now the travel around fishing in the species-specific destinations are just, everything's blown out of the water. And like Green Bay, I mean, we're in Green Bay right now. What an awesome fishing destination. And I remember driving by this and looking out at the bay and seeing boats out there and stuff and thinking, I would never be able to take a boat out there. Now I'm teaching a class to women in trolling out there, and I'm a licensed captain, and we have a live well full of walleyes, and to look back from there to now, it's just like, holy smokes. Mm-hmm. How did that happen? And I got goosebumps just telling you that, because, I know so many other women who have made that leap and have that pride associated with it and have had those adventures really enrich their lives. It is amazing.
Yeah. There's so much to chat about in there. I'm in that spot right now. I have a 2-year-old, so I haven't been ice fishing yet this year.
Yeah.
But it comes with the territory. But yeah, I can't wait to, I can see that ushering it back in, right? I'm sure I'll get out this year sometime, but, hopefully he ends up being that we get out 10 times a year, or
right.
15 or whatever it is. But, yeah, past that, I can't, that pride has to be just, consistent, right? When you think about that, it had to seem at times like, maybe it still does, like swimming up current or fighting against this constant pressure, right?
Yeah, more than people realize, I think.
I bet.
And people don't see the backside, all the crap you get about stuff. And
yeah.
But I tell you, I used to say when I very first started, when I described that outing with all my friends, and they're all partying and everything and nobody's fishing. And my comeback to that was, it's about the fishing. It's about the fishing. And now, fast forward 20 years, it's not about the fishing. It's so much more.
Yeah.
Because I see these women come in and participate and get to be around some other very supportive, very confident women. And all of a sudden, they're like, sitting a little taller, and they're making goals and achieving them and exceeding their own expectations for themselves. And it's changing their whole life. Not just about fishing. It's changing how they parent, how they are in a relationship, how they are in the workforce. And it's just not my observation that I see, although I do see it, but that is what they're telling us, And the first time they ever come to an event, how many of those women sat in the car and had a big argument with themselves whether or not they were even going to go in?
Yeah.
They almost turned around and went home. Mm-hmm. And we've developed this culture in this organization that as soon as that person gets in that room, they are so welcomed that you just see that their face just relax. And I think one phrase I hear over and over again is, I found my people. Mm-hmm. And the passion for fishing, I think, is a common denominator. And a lot of the people are from different walks of life and different ages and different cultures. But everyone comes together around fishing, but they really make it a priority to support each other. And there's no competition. There's no and that's the culture we specifically created. Some organizations are competitive based, like a tournament scene or this or that. Well, if you have that culture, the information isn't as free flowing. because it's a competition. In order to be good, you got to be better. You have to know something someone else doesn't. And our gals rejoice louder over their friends' success than they do their own, and those big firsts, like the first time they ever catch a walleye or the first time they ever catch fish jigging, and everybody celebrates that together. And it's just so good to have all that support.
Yeah. So I want to learn a little bit more about it. How did you start when did the group start? How long has it been in existence? And what kind of stuff do you do throughout the year?
Well, I think the very first one was the very first fish camp per se. And that was our first kind of official gathering. I think it was in 2007. And it was a camping fishing event, and nobody brought a boat, nobody had a boat. It was all shore fishing. And we did that at Buckhorn State Park up on Castle Rock Lake. Mm-hmm. And so we have that event every year. And then that next spring, after that first fall event, that winter we had an ice fishing event. In that spring, we had a spring walleye event. And it's just kind of built and grew, and at one point, it got so big that I had to kind of formalize it and had to structure it somehow because, once you start taking online payments and stuff, then all of a sudden the IRS is involved and you need to have an entity and it gets a lot more complicated. And next thing you know, you have 600 and some members and you have to be concerned about liability and insurance and all that stuff. So it's been quite a process, and we have grown not only in numbers, but skill-wise. We've gone from, just being novice anglers to being professional tournament anglers to captains, and to see that skill development has been amazing.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm constantly challenging myself to kind of keep adding to my skill set so I can keep teaching. And so I've had probably a boat now for 15 years, and now I'm currently shopping for a 26-foot boat. And, it's like years ago when I first started, it was just ice fishing was the big, wild, wild west for women. There was no one else doing it, and I was like the adventurer out there, it seemed like at the time. And now what's replaced that is Lake Michigan for me.
Sure, yep.
Because I have never seen another woman out of my port where I fish. I just don't see many other women captains. And there's more coming now. You hear of a few in different areas, but it's still kind of like that last frontier, so I'm trying to get a foothold in there and get good at that craft so I can, teach that to the next batch of women that would have an interest in that. Because there's nothing like salmon fishing, I tell you.
Yeah.
In living here in Wisconsin, I lived in Madison and when I first started all this, I had no idea that you could catch salmon like that over in Milwaukee or Sheboygan. A lot of people don't have a clue. The cat's out of the bag now. I think there's a lot of small boat anglers going over there, but
yeah,
we're lucky to live in Wisconsin, I can tell you that.
Yeah, Lake Michigan as a resource is unbelievable.
Yeah, definitely.
Super unbelievable. So how long have you been doing that? How long have you been chartering for salmon?
I've been a captain for 7 years, and, we don't, it's more about teaching women how to do it. If you go on a regular charter, you're sitting there with your friends on the boat and,
they set it all up.
They set it all up, and you're having a couple cocktails and just wait to get handed the rod to reel in the fish. And we want to teach women how to set the lines, how you're spreading out the lines in the water column, top to bottom and left to right, and covering a big path, and how to drive the boat and how to navigate, how to use maps. So that's kind of what, because it helps not only with big water fishing, but anywhere you go. Mapping and all those skills, we spend a lot of time talking about that.
Yeah. I think for anybody, that's an intimidating endeavor when you start to talk about big lake fishing. Did you have a mentor of sorts, or did you tackle it by yourself and learn as you went? How'd you do it?
Well, that was the same thing. Initially, it was just, okay, I'm going to try this. And it took really a long time for me to catch my first fish.
Yeah. And
I just took my trolling gear, my walleye trolling gear, and went and tried it out of Sheboygan. And I remember one mentor I did have, I was on the Lund Pro staff. And another Lund Pro staff member by the name of Marianne Husky fished the Pro Tour, the walleye tour up around here. And I got to know her, and she invited me to come out with her on Green Bay, and she was going to show me how to troll for walleye. So I met up with her, and we went out fishing for the day. And on my way home, I ended up buying 4 trolling rods, all the supplies, the planer boards, everything, and just kind of went with it. And I developed my skills, and I started teaching trolling to the gals, and then I started salmon fishing, using lead core and downriggers and all that other stuff. And I don't know, I just have this hunger to learn more all the time. And that's the great thing about fishing. It doesn't matter how much you know, there's always stuff to learn. And the more you know, the less I think I know. Mm-hmm. Like I thought I was really a good angler 20 years ago when I didn't know anything. And now that I know all this stuff, I think, God, there's so much more to learn. I just know hardly anything. So it's interesting how your perspective changes, even though, you're so much better, you think you're worse, but you're not. But it just, you realize how much there is to it,
mm-hmm. And if one species gets to the point where you get a little overconfident on it, try another one.
Right.
And you'll be just fine.
Right. And, one of the gals in the club, we fish together once in a while, and she said, I hate fishing with you because you just never, you're so busy looking for fish all the time that once you find them and catch them, then you just leave them and go look for some more. But that's what I do, for these events and stuff, like when we're bringing women fishing, I don't like to say, okay, you're on your own. I like to be able to tell them very specifically, okay, this is what's happening now, and this is why, and this is, this is where you're going to find the crappies here. And you can't have everyone fish in the same spot, so you need multiple spots. And so I've kind of developed that habit, so to speak, of being more of a hunter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That makes sense. I can see. How big are the events? Like when you go out, like how many would you say anglers do you have on the ice at one time? Or
well, we have an event, a big crappie thing in the spring, and we'll have 75 or 80.
Okay, so a lot.
That's the biggest ice event, and then we have about the same amount for our fall fish camp, but those numbers would be a lot higher if we had a bigger venue. It's just hard to manage. I mean, and when we first started, hardly anyone had boats, and now it's like, okay, we need more dock space. There's so many people with boats, they're loading them and unloading every day because we have 3 resorts together, and none of them, there's not enough pier space.
Yep.
So, and that's great.
Good problem to have, I was going to say. Yeah.
And it's funny because some of the gals, like in their family, there's like a his and a hers boat.
Nice.
She wasn't going to be left behind when he's out with his buddies, so she got her own boat. So nice. That's more common than you think.
Yeah. Yeah. You could teach me a thing or two about finding crappies through the ice. I always have trouble finding crappies through the ice. Tough.
Well, it depends on the time of year.
Yeah, they seem to really move, and they move to where I'm not, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I share that same thing though. I love learning new things. My latest endeavor that's humbled me is trout fishing, stream trout fishing.
Yeah.
I have a good friend of mine kind of helping me through that, learn the ropes. Something I never got into a ton of. I guess my first fishing passion is bass. I love bass fishing. I have for a long time. And then, like you were saying, you think you get good at something, and then stick me on a stream to try to find some brookies or something, and it's a whole new ball game of trying to learn how and where and when.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's and that's another thing, kudos to Wisconsin, because the trout fishing in Wisconsin is world class.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've been out to the Driftless area in western Wisconsin.
I'm going in the spring for the first time.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yep.
Yeah. And even around here, all the Great Lakes tributaries that run along the shoreline, we talk about steelhead fishing. That's a whole subculture in itself.
Mm-hmm.
That is like super fun.
Yeah. Yeah, there's just so many different species and things you can just attach to and learn and grow. Grass will never grow under your feet, unless you let it.
So we provide, opportunities, like we've had beginning steelheading classes and stuff that people don't even. It's like you know what you know, but you don't know what you don't know, and it's hard, if people have never even realized that that's an option. Just like catching huge brown trout through the ice in Milwaukee. That's another world-class fishery.
Yeah. I always heard about that. I lived down there for 7 or 8 years, and I never did that. I'd like to sometime, but I remember some of the spots that the folks do it, and that sounds like a blast. Is that something you get into?
Yeah, it's been amazing. And last year we provided an event for women, and this year we have one pending if the ice holds, but we'll have 40 women out there one weekend. And
nice.
Yeah, and it gets to the point where I'm not the expert, but we have another member who is very, very skilled at that. Kimber Pomp. I don't know whether her new married last name. She just got married, but her social media is the Ice Fishing Diaries, and she's really good at it. And she has a lot of buddies that guide, so they host our gals out there in Milwaukee. And last year, women had the time of their life. I mean, huge trout were caught. It was so fun.
Yeah. So you mentioned the Lund Pro staff earlier. What types of those kind of things have you went through in your career? Competitive fishing, pro staffs, making it what a lot of folks consider like that next leap, right?
Right.
What kind of stuff have you done in that realm?
Well, I was part of the first all women's team to ever fish the AIM walleye tournament circuit, and tournament fishing, that has changed over the last few years, big time. But when I did it, when I started, it was almost like tournament fishing is taking a college class, and so you're learning the water, you're practicing, you're studying, and then the tournament is the test. So it's a really good way, or it was at that time, to really improve your skills, because you're really working towards it. It's not like a casual day of fishing. And no, there was never an all-women team before, so that was okay. Well, I guess we should do that if no one's doing it. And I'm not a good tournament angler. In fact, I'm a terrible tournament angler. I mean, I can catch fish, but you put a tournament thing, and I just kind of get crazy. I don't follow the plan. She's rolling her eyes at me because she's my tournament partner too, and she feels the pain that I cause. But I have had some success. There was a big brown trout tournament last year that we did for the first time and ended up getting third place. So, and we've done a few salmon tournaments and have done good and cashed checks, but it for me, tournament fishing is just kind of forces you to get better because you're practicing and you're working so hard. I see there's a couple tournaments on the other side of Lake Michigan called the Big Boy Tournament, where they have the powder puff for the women and then the Big Boy Tournament.
Oh, goodness. And how bad do you want to go and win?
I know. I want to go and fish the Big Boy Tournament, Ricky and I. So, just to show up and be the woman captain and the all-women team out there. So it's not that I really am a competitive salmon angler, but I just kicking open these doors that haven't been opened before, and just to prove that they can do it, because you always have that one little girl that's watching from the sideline, and she's looking at you, and she's thinking, if she can do it, I can do it.
Yeah, and that's one thing I planned on bringing up in conversation today. Where do kids come into play with this? How are you ushering in the next generation with the group and what you do?
Well, I couldn't really be any busier than I am right now. It's just, there's not enough hours in the day. And part of it is I'm teaching the moms. And if then the moms can teach the kids. And I think that there are more programs available for kids. There's a lot of kids programs. There's a lot of veterans programs. There's a lot of these outreach programs for specific, demographics, kids or veterans or whatever. But, my outreach is to the adult women, and many of them are older because they're out of that child rearing working phase where they have a little bit of free time now. Mm-hmm. And a lot of them now are getting close to retirement age, or they're taking up fishing that they did as a kid but then got away from. And I think that if I was going to add anything on, where I see the void is, the high school fishing is really taken off. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of girls that are being involved in that program. But once they leave school, where is the organized structure around fishing for them? Again, their peer group isn't as large as the male peer group for fishing. So unless they have a couple good friends that go fishing, that peer group is hard to find. So it's between that age, I think, like the early 20s, the 20-year-olds and that whole age group, because they're the ones that kind of fall off for a while. Mm-hmm. So, I don't know what the answer is to that, but, and I think, what you mentioned before about how you saw this TikTok with all these young proficient girls having a blast out there. I think that they're reaching those kids, more so than, other, avenues, but, just to get them out there and more things are coming up. I used to be the only game in town. If you didn't come with us, you didn't get to go. Now there's women's events popping up all over the place. Mm-hmm. There's all sorts of organizations that are targeting women and providing opportunities, and which is great. It's so good to see. Yeah,
I think it's a really poignant example, too, of teaching the mom to then teach the children, because that for many folks who immerse themselves in the outdoors is where it came from, right? I mean, you mentioned your story was with your dad. My earliest stuff was all with my dad, being out fishing and hunting and just immersing myself in the outdoors. And that was I didn't think of it in that way until one of my best friends on earth started fishing with me, and he came from a family that didn't fish prior to that. And I didn't look at it in that way until then, when I got to kind of share the sport with him and share the outdoors. And at that time, I was a completely broke college student. I had this 14-foot V-bottom from 1970. It was old and with a 5-horse motor on it. But we got to get out and chase fish together and kind of taught him how to do it a little bit. And now he does it with his kids.
Yeah.
It's awesome. You know? And I never looked at it like that until then.
Right. Yeah, it's important. I think that I know even this tip-up town coming up, I'm getting feedback about how my little great nieces and nephews, they're all talking, oh, we're going to go to tip-up town, we're going to go ice fishing, and hopefully that will stick with them. And it's funny because another demographic we get is people who have gotten divorced or widowed or broken up with their boyfriend, that they've somehow lost their connection to fishing.
Okay.
Like one woman, her husband passed away, and she just sold all the fishing stuff because she thought fishing was over for her. And then she found us, and it's like, dang, now she's buying it all back, and so a lot of women that have had a taste of it and then lost it, until they find their group again or their connection back to fishing, they feel lost. And I remember this one gal called one time and said, well, I'm a full-time caretaker for my husband because he's in a wheelchair, and I just don't know if this group is for me. Or I said, well, this group sounds like it's exactly for you, And she has just turned out to be an awesome member and really contributes and really gets a lot back. And I could say that over and over again for so many people. And, hunting and fishing both, if you don't know anything, and you're going to go out and just try to do it, it's really hard just to go try to do it. Mm-hmm. It's not like buying a pair of roller skates and just trying it in your neighborhood. You don't know what to buy, you don't know where to go, it's kind of a little bit of a learning curve, and it takes a little bit of an investment in time before you find that first level of success. And the more connected you are to an organization, the quicker that timeline is. I wish I'd had the education way earlier because I'd be so much better,
And there's also, we mentioned it earlier a little bit, but there's also anytime you do anything in the outdoors, there's also a certain level of safety that you have to know what you're doing to keep yourself safe. And that's not always the easiest to acquire either. Right.
On big water, on ice, or for women, just going to a shore fishing spot that may be secluded.
Yeah.
Women have concerns about stuff that men don't ever have to think about. So having somebody to go with, educating them on maybe some places to avoid or some places that are relatively safe and how to make sure you let someone know where you're going, and just about decision making in times of crisis. We talk about that, about taking action, being proactive. And it's funny because over the course of the years, our members have been involved in numerous life-saving events. I pulled a guy out of the Wolf River that fell out of his boat. Water was 34 degrees and there's massive current. A couple other people ended up stopping a runaway pontoon boat that the guy fell off trying to get his dog back in. And there has been just numerous things that have happened, and we talk about that stuff, like, okay, let's talk about whether it's falling through the ice or fish, having something happen with your boats taking on water. So we'll kind of review some of those and practice mentally, and then be prepared if something comes up to be able to take action. Okay, wheel bearings, how to load your trailer, all these different tasks that are associated with outdoor adventure that, people need to be prepared. And we've had people driving down the road and have a wheel bearing go. We just had one last weekend. And most of the time, they're thinking about it, they're prepared as in they're listening for stuff, and they're being hyper observant. They're touching their wheel bearings when they get out at a gas station to see if they feel hot. Where else are they going to learn all this stuff? You just don't know unless somebody's telling you or teaching you or doing it for you. So being an independent outdoors woman, you have to kind of be aware of some of the stuff that you didn't even realize that you should be aware of. And so we try to really encompass all those subcategories in addition to the fishing. And I think that's where a lot of the empowerment comes in. You know, I mean, how many times have we gotten flat tires on boat trailers? Or last weekend we had, we were fishing in a blizzard in the UP, and there was like 3 trucks that got stuck. And we're no cell service, middle of nowhere. You know, we handle what comes up ourselves because we have to when you're in those situations. And some of these women are like, oh my gosh, you know, it's so interesting to be able to solve these problems without just calling my husband, you know. And that's where a lot of the empowerment comes in. You know, it's not only setting out to catch a 25-inch walleye and being successful, but it's all that other stuff that is associated with that.
And that's where all the pride comes in too.
Oh, absolutely.
Like you talked about the charters earlier and how most of them are just hand you the rod and reel it in. Does anybody feel like they actually did that? Not really, right?
Yeah.
But in that scenario, when you dig out the truck twice on the way to putting up your pop-up shelter, and then you catch a nice, say a 27-inch walleye out of an inland lake, like, and you did it all.
Yeah.
You're living it. That's the pride.
Yeah, for sure. And that's what gives you the goosebumps, and that's what keeps you going.
Yeah. So, when you specifically, what are some of your more favorite species to chase?
Well, I have become a fish snob. When you have these opportunities to catch some really quality fish, catching a bunch of subpar fish just doesn't do it anymore for me. I said that the other day. I said, yeah, I like jigging for walleyes, and I like salmon fishing and steelhead fishing, and I'm going to Idaho next week to chase big perch on Cascade.
Okay.
That was a trip that I was given by Hero Fishing, so they're taking me out there, which I'm very honored and very excited about. But, we go to Lake of the Woods and Mille Lacs for trophy smallies up in Door County. We'll put on a smallmouth bass clinic, and women will get up there and take their boats out of Sturgeon Bay and catch these big smallies. And it's like, who'd have ever thought they were doing that?
Yeah.
For me, my next thing that I'm really trying to accomplish is I want a big boat. I'm looking for like a 26-foot boat to take out on Lake Michigan and be able to deal with a little bit more waves than I can now in my 19-foot boat. And although that boat does great, I just want to be able to take more people out at a time and have a little sleeping thing, quarters in it, a little cuddy cabin, and maybe go fish that big boy tournament.
Maybe. Yeah. So it's more about the milestones, I guess you'd say.
I think so. And, I didn't intend it. That's not how I started out, but that's the way it's going. And, now when you get older, you realize the clock's ticking, and the older you get, the faster it goes, the faster it ticks. So it's like, okay, people have their different bucket list things that they want to do and they want to accomplish. And this is pretty much one of the last things that I want to obviously get to be a much better salmon angler all around. But having this boat, I think, is the next thing for me. And so we'll still teach women how to operate little boats, but what about all the women that want to learn how to operate a big boat?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Where do they go for that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing about it is the outdoors specifically, age comes into play more often than some other like life's pastimes or passions or whatever it is, because there's a certain amount of like you have to be able to carry and lift and move and do a lot of like mobile things.
Right.
So it does play into effect more than we maybe think about on a day-to-day basis.
Well, on the extreme end of it, I think so. But, when you look at what they offer in high school, for example, football, basketball, volleyball, all that stuff that you can't do when you're older. Why aren't they teaching fishing? Why isn't fishing part of the curriculum for gym class? Someone can be really successful that's not genetically superior physically to some of the other kids, but they can still have that, competition and the feeling of pride and competition, but football is, all the money goes to football, it seems like, which then after school they're done. They'll never really be playing again.
Mm-hmm, the vast majority, yeah. And there's a whole nother layer to that conversation that you could insert about like how it's something that could be not in the times that we live in, but for humanity, it was important to surviving.
Oh, right.
Like football was never, I'm a huge football fan, but football was never critical to our survival as a species, but was fishing? I think so,
Yeah, and the same thing with food, gardening and growing your food and harvesting your food. And I think we've kind of gotten away from some of that stuff with the way the culture is advanced. And I think there's still a place for that, maybe not for everybody, but I think that those traditions in that those abilities need to continue.
Yeah, it's come up on the podcast several times. Something I'm really passionate about is closing the proximity of where our food comes from and our knowledge around it, right? Like it's a whole different there's a lot of different kind of steaks in the world, and the one that was raised on the road down the road from your house is a different steak than the one you buy from the grocery store, right?
Absolutely. And that's, one of the great benefits of being a good angler is being able to have really quality food. I mean, I've had salmon last night, and I'm going to have venison today, and I mean, just that kind of food is so, I think, important, and I feel fortunate enough to be able to have, I can't afford to buy that beef in the store like that. You look at some of the prices of some of the beef, and it's like, holy smokes.
Oh my goodness, you can spend $30 on a chuck roast right now. It's crazy.
I know, it's like, gosh, that's I just better fish more.
Yeah. Yeah. What's your go-to if you had someone that you were going to make a fish dinner for that hadn't eaten fish like that before? What's your go-to recipe species, and how would you prepare it?
Well, really simple is to bake and broil it with lemon and pepper. And I mean, we've had a lot of fishing cook-offs, contests, at different events we have and stuff. And Ricky's lemon pepper recipe generally wins it all. Simple,
nice.
Somewhat healthy except for the butter, but not fried, doesn't have to fry, no mess in the house. And I do a lot of grilling.
Okay.
I grill a lot of salmon with like a ginger teriyaki glaze, which is just delicious. And then there's species that people kind of disregard as being good table fare, and they're actually excellent. Northern pike is excellent. Burbot, that's something that we just caught a bunch of last week, and up in the UP.
Yeah.
And that's really fun to catch. It's really a species that has grown with anglers. I remember years ago, my cousins would get one on a tip-up, and they thought it was junk, and they would just leave it on the ice, but they're excellent table fare, and they're super fun to catch. So
I've still never eaten burbot.
Yeah.
I've never eaten it, but I heard it's delicious. I don't know that I've ever caught one.
Yeah, it's really popular in Minnesota now. And I've fished we just filmed a television show with Discovering in the UP, and the host of the show that was out with us had never filmed a burbot being caught. So we got some nice ones that night. So that was fun. But
nice. So lemon pepper baked is the go-to.
Yep.
Yeah, I can dig it. And then like you said, your house doesn't smell like grease.
Right. Yeah.
Afterwards. Yeah. So, reflecting on that journey of sharing fishing with so many different people, you mentioned some of probably what's next on your plate with getting the bigger boat and the big water, but at some point, you have to like reflect on the lives you've touched sometimes, right? Instead of, it seems like you're pretty forward thinking, you want to do the next thing, but I mean, you've made a lot of progress over the years doing what you do.
Yeah, it's funny because it was never the intention when I started. And when my first job, I went to school for nursing, so I was a nurse first, and then I was a police officer. And then now I've been doing this for over 20 years. But I think about those different professions and all the opportunities to help people and change lives and stuff. And when I put it all together, the amount of lives that I've changed for the positive and biggest impact I've had, I think, has been with the fishing. And I'd have never guessed that if you'd have asked me that. I didn't foresee that as a side effect of what I'm doing.
Yeah. Well, oftentimes the greatest things in life start with a passion, and then they grow into something that's bigger than that passion was itself.
Right.
And oftentimes unexpected.
Yeah, and I get that feedback every week, just even if I overhear something else, it's not necessarily directed at me, but just the way that women are interacting with each other and supporting each other, and what a impact their participation has created for them. And I'm pretty proud of that.
Yeah, absolutely. As you should be. It's hard. There's a reason why trailblazers are fewer and far between than people that go along with the norm, is because like climbing a hill is a lot easier than a lot harder than walking on flat ground, right?
Yeah.
And wind and rain in your face, whatever kind of adage you want to put around it, there's a reason that stuff is not for the faint of heart at times,
Yeah, you have to be somewhat of a fighter, and it was a different world even 20 years ago. Even, you look back, we live in a time now where things change so fast. And, from whatever, even started out in the medical industry and then policing and then fishing. And I mean, just all the advancements, everything has come so far in such a short period of time. It's like all a blur, really.
Yeah. I'd be interested to hear, and it's kind of an opinion question, so you don't have to share a ton if you don't want, but what's your opinion on how tech has changed fishing? Like as far as like how locators have evolved, and like just how technology in general has changed fishing in those same 20 years. Is it a good thing in your eyes, a bad thing in your eyes? Is it a double-edged sword? Like what has that done to change everything?
Well, I think it can go either way. But what I see happening is, sure, the technology is changing. You have to, everything has changed. The equipment, the technology, how you fish is different than how our grandparents fished. And a certain amount of that comes with added responsibility, which I think people are more aware of now than they used to be. So let's just talk about harvesting. Years ago, whatever you caught, you harvested. Mm-hmm. Everything was a harvest fest. Now, it's not. People are much more apt to catch and release. People are more mindful of fish during breeding seasons and spawning seasons than they ever have been in the past. The latest big thing is barotrauma, catching fish out of deeper water, and their survival rate. And so technology is proving points in terms of barrow trauma. They're watching the fish leave, and they're identifying problem areas through what they're seeing with this electronics. And is it going to get in the hands where people are going to go just be able to easily catch all the fish and keep them out? I doubt that that's going to happen, you know. But I think that, you know, regulations in terms of harvest caps, slot limits, I think it's all part of managing the resource is part of it, and that's going to have to evolve with some of these technology changes. Educating anglers, you know, sometimes I think, God, things are so much better than they used to be, you know, with people letting fish go that they should, and then you see a post where someone's leaving all this litter at a site, and it's like, God, you know, what? I don't understand. How are people still littering? You know, how does that even happen? Who does that?
I know.
Who are those people, and why? I can't even fathom that.
I know. It's funny. That same thing has floated through my head so many times. Like, I don't know who throws the empty bag of chips out of the window. Like, I feel like no one I know or like talk to would do that. So who does that? Who's throwing the chip bag out the window?
I know.
It's wild.
Or leaving stuff on the ice, you know?
Yeah. I think that's a really good point, though. I think that's a really interesting way to look at it, because regardless if we want it to or not, things are going to evolve. There's going to be a demand to be able to do something easier or more effectively or whatever it may be. And I think with fishing, especially because, like, as anybody develops as an angler, you kind of get eyes under the water, right? You start to know where fish are going to be. And I think I had a conversation recently where someone was equating this conversation to drone technology and hunting. I like bow hunting a lot. And like an infrared thing on a drone, finding where a buck may be bedded that day. And they equated that to fishing. And I was like, that's not really the same. Because, like, it is in a way. But fishing, I think there's still an amount of this, like, eyes underwater that we've had from the earliest technology of, like, a depth finder to know how deep of water you're in. So, I don't know. I think that's an interesting way to look at it, though. I guess what I'm saying, of the way that as long as the regulations keep up and it's a fair shake, it's all right, you know?
Right. Plus, like even in Lake Michigan, you know, that the stocking efforts that go on there is huge, you know, and I think that you can do a lot of fish management because there's more information now than ever about what the resource holds, you know. So I don't know. I'm just kind of delving into some of the advanced forward-facing sonars and stuff, and sometimes I think it's more of a pain than it's worth. Yeah. But that's really what's changing the tournament series. Used to be the old guys that have had years and years of experience were dominating across the board for tournament fishing for years and years. Now it's these young bucks that are really dialed into the new electronics, and their skills are from a different set, you know, and they're winning. The youngest person who, you know, it's getting younger and younger because they're so familiar with that technology. And I still struggle with it, you know, the new stuff, you know, just like the social media. If I would have be 10 years younger, you know, it probably would have made a difference, but, you know, it's not my strong suit by any means.
Well, catching fish is, that's
right. You know, it's interesting though, because I remember years ago I was fishing in Madison, and there was a guy, an experienced angler there fishing, and he had a tip-up flag go off, and he went to the hole, and there was all these young teenage boys surrounding this hole. There was me, the woman, the experienced angler, and then all this group of young boys, and this guy caught this really nice walleye, probably 27-inch walleye. And, you know, he held it up. he took the hook out of its mouth and he put it right back down the hall. And every one of those young boys' jaws just went, they were just shocked that that guy let that fish go. As was I, because at that time in my fishing career, if I caught a legal walleye, you know, sometimes in the summer it would take me half a year to do it. I'd open a bottle of champagne. It would be all this celebration, and it would have been mine, you know. But he left such an impact on everyone who saw that, you know, like, pretend you've done it before,
yeah.
you know. And once you become more skilled, it's not such a aha moment, I caught a walleye. You know, I can catch walleyes whenever I want to, so I don't have to keep every one. And that mentality is changing. I think the old timers are still, they're catching more fish because they're benefiting from some of the technology, but they still have that harvest mindset. And so, oh, well, geez, I have to give some fish away now because I have too much. Who wants some fish? You know, I'm like, let it go. Let them go. You don't have to bring them home.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting. There's so many little facets of things that happen. I don't know.
Yeah, the developments, you know, of the culture around whatever activity is, you know, equal or greater than the technology that comes along with it, because everybody can use it. But you're exactly right. Like, you know, that person that let that 27-incher go, if it was 17, he probably would have kept it and ate it, you know?
Right.
Like, it's just a different mindset. And oftentimes you hope for the better, right? You hope things develop and we continue to progress. Yeah. Well, it was awesome chatting with you, Barb. I appreciate you taking some time with us.
Yeah, it's, you know, I love talking about fishing. I could talk for any, you know, that's the thing, you know, if you fish, you like talking about fishing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. What's, maybe leave us with that. What's the, and it's kind of a, you know, it's a loaded question. There's probably not one, but when you think of the most memorable fish or a memorable fish that you've caught, what's one that really means something to you?
Well, you know, I would have to say that it's this walleye that I have mounted on my wall, and it was, I don't know, it's probably 25 inches or so, but when I was fishing by myself and just trying to figure out ice fishing for walleyes and stuff, and I never really caught that many. And so one time I was out by myself with my dog. I ended up catching this walleye, and it was like the biggest walleye I had ever seen. And I remember just, you know, it was so big, you know, so I ended up having it mounted. And in hindsight, I mean, since then I've caught walleyes over 30 inches and much, much bigger walleye. But that was kind of a turning point where I had put all those hours in trying to be successful, and it was really the first time that I really was successful, you know, so it meant it was a big reward for me, you know. And I look back now at some of the fish I caught and some of the photos I have, and I just feel like I'm so lucky, you know, to be able to experience some of these things. And if you're ever out on Lake Michigan as the sun is coming up, or the sun is going down and the moon is full at night and the stars, I mean, fishing provides so many opportunities to just be at one with the earth, you know, and be really present in that moment and not be thinking about something down the road. Just be there and be in it. And it can be so magical and so beautiful. And I feel sorry for the people that don't have that in their lives.
Yeah, it's an important connection, I think, for us to make, because there's a certain percentage of a human that was made to be in that environment, right? And I think it needs to be fed more often than it is for a lot of folks.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you, Barb.
Thank you.